Well, what's your advice for cracking that egg? Because many people have had
Sure.
to sit for for years,
Yeah.
in pursuit of that kind of an experience. And maybe you have a genetic propensity. I don't
No.
know.
Well, I suspect I do. I was sort of born a mystic, but that's not enough. Um, I think the royal road to mystical consciousness is the intensive sensory focus. In other words, if you are walking a balance beam or threading a needle or painting trim or climbing a difficult, rock wall, you're so intensely in your senses, you're not thinking about your resume, you're not thinking about your taxes. You can't do both things.
Right, right.
So the real key here is, can you shift from this logical, thought-driven mind into a sensory awareness that locks you into this other state of consciousness?
Hmm.
It's like, you're sitting at night, reading a book and you hear something scratching outside your window. You don't keep reading, you don't think about what it could be. You suddenly get awake, really awake, and you listen. That's the state I'm talking about. And you can take it further and call it radical awe, because in this state of awe, the world becomes brighter and more beautiful, and you begin to have more transcendent experience.
Hmm. So, what else can you say about, how one gets there or prepares for it? Because it sounds like it's something that you have kind of cultivated in your life.
Well, I think there's a practice, and I've talked about this practice in many of my books. Ordinary Enlightenment talks about it in depth, so does Finding Heaven Here. It has to do with like 4 steps. You have to stop thinking, which means shifting to the sensory mode.
Not easy to do, though.
Well,
thinking.
It's by shifting to the sensory mode that the thinking stops. See,
Okay,
that's what's very interesting about this. You can't just say, I'm not going to think anymore, because you're already thinking that. And the dog is chasing its tail. But when you look at your hand intensely and you follow, and you look at the cells and you look at the new wrinkles and so forth, when you shift into that sensory mode, the thinking has stopped, literally. And you begin to see something that you don't normally see. So anyway, the first step is to move into the sensory mode. And the second step is to intensify it greatly, which any of us can do. It's just, focus on something with as much intensity as you possibly can. That's part of the journey of awakening. And then the third step is to become conscious of consciousness itself. Okay, direct consciousness back on itself with the realization that you're not just experiencing your own consciousness, which you have wrapped in a story, but that you are experiencing the consciousness of the divine. And you just stay there, conscious of consciousness. And then you bring that consciousness into your body, and you begin to feel a quality of joy and wonder and bliss and love and inclusiveness. I mean, this whole flooding up of what's in the ground of being anyway begins to define you. And as you practice these practices, and you could do them walking, down the road into the woods, you can do them, when you're sitting at home in the evening. I wouldn't do them driving. In many other ways, you are actually training yourself to leave the left hemisphere, which is like a Hoover vacuum that sucks up all your consciousness and puts it into ideas. And you're leaving that for the world of what is. So when you're intensely focused on what is, you discover that it's way different than anything you think. And that is the door opening into this divine world and divine consciousness.
Yeah. It's interesting that it starts with this attention to the sensory.
Yes.
Because I suspect that in the Jungian framework, I am a sensation type.
Mm-hmm.
There are objects that are very numinous for me. I'm very interested in them. They have a charge,
That's exactly it. Yes, you are tapping into the divine realm that is exuding all the time.